Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, and welcome to our weekly media briefing and public health update with Montgomery County Executive Mark Elrich. I'm Lorna Virgili, Hispanic Public Information Officer, and joining us today are Dr. James Bridgers, who is the Director of the Department of Health and Human Services, Mr. Sean O'Donnell, Assistant Chief of Public Health Services, and Dr. Earl Stoddard, who is Assistant Chief Administrative Officer. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Mr. County Executive, welcome back, and the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you all for joining me today. I think, as you know, I've been out of the country for most of the last 2 weeks, and I wanted to spare me trying to do a media briefing at 12:30 in the morning in order to do this at 12:30 here. So thank Rich for standing in for me while I was in Taiwan and India. Over the last couple of years, we've been very intentional about building our international presence, and we're starting to see real results from that. While we were in Taiwan, we signed an agreement with Galaverse, a global semiconductor technology company that specializes in satellite systems and space-based infrastructure, which is eager to expand its base and establish a presence in Montgomery County. And what was interesting in both the nations we went to was the use of AI, which was pretty much ubiquitous. In India, we were at this very large tech show, and we attended and we got to see hardware and software solutions that are being introduced. And in Taiwan's Smart Cities Conference, AI is embedded into almost every technological innovation that was on display there. One especially interesting aspect were companies whose innovations centered on reducing the energy consumption of AI, which I know is a huge problem. We're wrestling with that today. There are people who are cognizant of the need to improve AI's efficiency, and some have demonstrated use cases where AI results are rendered with less energy consumption. I'm interested to see where this is going, and I think this is something we all need to be aware of. It is clear for us that in order to remain competitive, we need to invest in support of advanced technology across industry sectors. There is not just one industry where this applies to. That was one of the things that was so clear in Taiwan when you saw all the various gadgets they had for everything from healthcare to traffic control. There probably wasn't anything where there wasn't AI involved in it. And that's why we're working here with the University of Maryland Institute for Health Computing. Their work is important for the life sciences sector in Montgomery County. And we believe that also something of interest to some of the people we talked to when we were in Asia. Since 2023, we've participated in more than a dozen economic development trips across multiple countries. These trips are about making connections, explaining what Montgomery County offers, and building relations that can turn into investment and jobs. And frankly, it involved introducing Montgomery County to people who don't know us. Going back to our first trips, people knew Boston, they knew San Francisco, they knew San Diego, they knew the Triangle, but they didn't know Montgomery County. And here we are, the third largest biocluster in the United States, and people didn't know who we are. Even though they knew about NIH and FDA, somehow the messaging that had historically been done didn't connect our cluster to NIH and FDA. So we've been doing a lot of work to try to make that connection and let people know not only do you get NIH and FDA if you come to Montgomery County, but you get the third largest biocluster in the country if you come to Montgomery County. And so a lot of our conversations involved telling our stories. And I'll go back to our trip to Japan last year, where we met with a couple of major trade groups over there, and people had virtually no knowledge of Montgomery County. When they talked about locating companies in the United States, they immediately said, well, the West Coast. And we had to remind them, if you're trying to get, drugs approved, FDA is on the East Coast and FDA is in Montgomery County, and there's a real advantage to being there. So telling our stories become really important, and I think it's something we're going to have to continue to do over and over again until we become a norm in people's minds, like Boston is, like San Francisco and San Diego are. This is something that's doable, and I know that the new economic development team is well aware of the need to emphasize this in the outreach we do. We've already seen companies from places like India, Taiwan, and South Korea establish a presence here, and others are in the pipeline as they complete fundraising or are expanding into U.S. markets now. We've also signed agreements with international partners to support business development and create pathways for companies to enter Montgomery County. These trips also benefit our local businesses. More than 30 county-based companies have joined us on these missions, building their own partnerships and expanding into global markets. This work takes time, but it's how you grow an economy, by building relationships, staying engaged, and making sure Montgomery County is part of the global conversation. While I was away, I was happy to learn that the United Kingdom-based company Risk Ledger will open an office in the county. The company's decision to establish a presence in the Rockville Innovation Center underscores the advantages of locating in a community with world-class research institutions, a strong cluster of tech companies, and a highly skilled workforce, as well as proximity to federal partners such as the U.S. National Cybersecurity Center of Excellence. So I look forward to supporting their growth. Montgomery County government, our state government, and our regional partners all play critical roles in helping small or expanding companies accelerate next-generation technology development. International engagement and outreach helps create investments and brings more jobs to Montgomery County. And speaking of jobs, Samsung Biologics is opening in Rockville. Yesterday, I attended the grand opening of Samsung Biologics manufacturing operations. I was joined by Governor Wes Moore, Representative April McClain Delaney, and other state and local leaders to celebrate this investment and its impact on our economy. This is Samsung's first manufacturing facility in the United States. This is not a small thing. Samsung is a major international manufacturer of drugs, and their presence here is significant. Samsung acquired GSK's facility where they will continue to manufacture projects for GSK, but they plan on expanding the scope of their work. They're going to expand the footprint and the workforce, and most importantly, expand production services that they will be able to offer here. And those services will benefit existing companies as well as attract other companies to locate nearby. By taking over this facility and retaining more than 500 employees, Samsung preserves critical expertise and keeps highly skilled jobs here in our community. And I'm really appreciative that, Samsung's evaluation of the company was that not only were they going to take over GSK's physical plant, but that they had enough respect for the workers who worked there and appreciation of the work they were doing, that they felt comfortable retaining the entire workforce. That is not a small thing. Those of us who have seen companies change hands before, more often than not, we deal with a reduction of employment, and it's great to have some Samsung actually talking about increases in employment over time. That matters for those workers, and it matters for their families, and it matters for the long-term stability of our economy. Samsung wanted to be in Montgomery County to be close to institutions like NIH and the Food and Drug Administration, along with a network of private companies, many of whom they have relationships with, and research organizations that support everything from discovery to manufacturing. Companies know they can come here and find people and the partnerships they need. I want to thank Samsung Biologics for its commitment to our community. I also want to recognize the employees who continue to operate the facility. Their experience and skill are what make this operation possible. Montgomery County continues to stand out in conversations with international companies. Our diversity in our workforce and our proximity to federal agencies give us an advantage. And Samsung's presence here reinforces that. We are part of a global industry that shows that companies see long-term value in being here, and it helps position us for future growth. This afternoon, I'm attending the World Vaccine Congress in Washington, D.C., where Montgomery County was proud to be represented as both an exhibitor and part of a broader discussion on the future of vaccine development. This is one of the largest and most important gatherings of its kind in the world. It brings together researchers, manufacturers, policymakers, public health leaders, to look at the full pipeline from early stage research to large scale manufacturing and distribution. Montgomery County belongs in that conversation. We are at the center of one of the nation's leading biohealth clusters, and companies here are working on vaccines and therapies every day, supported by institutions like the National Institutes of Health and the Food and Drug Administration. That work has global impact, and it's one of the reasons companies continue to locate and grow here. The conversations at the conference are occurring at a critical moment. Public confidence in vaccines, and more broadly in science, is being challenged. In fact, science and research are being attacked. Statements and actions coming out of Washington, including from Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and the Trump administration, have contributed to confusion about vaccines that have proven safe and effective for decades. I'm probably the only person on this call who remembers the 1950s as a kid. And I remember as a kid in my elementary school standing in line to get the polio vaccine when it was first available in schools. And I was in school in DC. I don't remember whether that was 54, 55, or 56. Too early to remember how old I was standing in that line, but I remember being in that line. I had no idea what polio was or how widespread it was, let alone how debilitating it was. We were just getting a vaccine. It was only later that I learned about polio's real impact. The immunization campaign that started in 1953 led to a drop in polio cases from 35,000 a year to 5,600, I'm sorry. So 35,000 to 5,600 between 1953 and 1957. And by 1961, the cases had dropped to 161, and polio up until now has been all but eradicated. Americans learned that vaccines worked, and it changed what it meant to grow up in America. I remember, again, more recently reading about parents not letting their kids to go out and play because they're afraid going out and playing in warm weather would lead to them contracting polio. I'm so glad that I didn't grow up with that fear. We dealt with mumps and measles, but they didn't have that kind of impact of growing up as a kid and having to worry about, was I going to be paralyzed for the rest of my life? So I'm thankful I was spared that. But it also makes you aware of just what a hold polio had over the United States and other countries until it was eradicated by vaccines, which makes the tragedy of this moment in the federal government all the more appalling, because we know what good vaccines do. And it's a shame that the federal government can't bring itself to wrap its head around it. What we're seeing now today has consequences. Diseases like measles, which has largely been eliminated, are reappearing. Vaccine hesitancy over shots we've routinely taken is going to worsen public health. It's another administration to undermine trust in science and research. And it's dangerous because people will get sick and die because of the misinformation coming out of Trump and Kennedy. As we close out this year, respiratory virus season, and its onset with another new COVID variant, I asked Sean O'Donnell to share with everyone some of the latest updates on vaccination levels and challenges and initiatives, as well as resources. So I'm going to stop, turn it over to Sean, and thank you for being here.
Thank you, Mr. County Executive. I'm going to go back to something we did a while back and share my screen to show you all some data. And while I don't recall the polio vaccine lines, I do recall the COVID vaccine lines that we had. What I'm going to show you is a little bit of data we have on, as we sort of near the end of the respiratory virus season, where we are, and these come from the Maryland dashboards. And Montgomery County is right up there with Howard County for some of the highest flu vaccination rates in Maryland at approximately 39%. We'll probably get over 40% before all is said and done, which is pretty good. It's similar. Last year, we were about 42% for the season for flu. This is just with Immunet records, so there probably are some folks who have gotten those vaccinations outside of Maryland. It may not show up in our Immunet records, so that the true rates are a little bit higher. Want to also share now where we are with vaccination records for COVID. Those are much, much lower. Again, Montgomery County is one of the highest vaccinated counties in Maryland at almost 12%, but you can see across the state, the statewide vaccination rate's only just under 8%. And a lot of this, we believe, is because it's become more difficult to get the COVID vaccine. I think most of you remember when Montgomery County was well in the high 90 percentile for vaccination rates for COVID. But that was when COVID vaccine was free, was widely available throughout the county from county partners and other partners. You did not have to have any particular type of insurance to get it. Now, if you don't have insurance, it can cost you between $100 and $200 to get the COVID shot. And if you do have insurance, you can get it for free if you go to a place that supports your insurance. So it's just become a lot more difficult to get that shot, unfortunately. And this is something within public health we'd like advocacy to make it easier. To give you an idea of who's getting the vaccinations, it's a little bit higher towards our seniors, which is good. Those are the folks who generally need it the most. But everyone can benefit from having an annual vaccination. Many of you have heard of the latest variant, the cicada variant, and this is still an offshoot of the Omicron variant. The existing vaccine still should provide some protection against it. It remains to be seen how much the new variant differs and how it might be able to evade some of that immune protection, but it's still within the same family tree as the vaccines we have available now. I also want to talk about what are we doing in public health for this. Many people are aware of all the vaccinations that come out for school-age kids, the vaccine for children, and indeed that's how most of the vaccines are given are to child-age individuals. There are some vaccines that are dedicated for adults, such as the shingles vaccine. This past year, we mentioned on one of the previous media events that Maryland has started up a program for adults called the Maryland Vaccine Program. And I'm just sharing some data from this last month that our team has done. And these are numbers of adults who are getting vaccines through this program now at no cost to them. And so these are for individuals who don't have insurance or their insurance does not cover vaccines. And we've given out vaccines. Indeed, IPV is for polio. We've given out vaccines, the varicella for chickenpox, MMRs for measles, mumps, and rubella, where we've seen measles cases and mumps cases increase around the country, as well as the COVID and flu vaccines. And so, again, we're trying to make sure everyone has the vaccines that they need. This is admittedly a small number compared to the number of people who are out there who don't have vaccinations for these diseases, particularly for annual vaccinations like COVID or flu. But we just wanted to share some of that data and highlight why it's really important. You can still get your COVID shot. You can still get your flu shot. And if you have insurance, it's covered. If you don't have insurance, you can contact us at the Montgomery County Department of Health and Human Services. The phone number is 240-777-1050. And again, if your child needs a vaccine or if you're an adult and do not have vaccine coverage, please call us at that number. So with that, I'd like to turn it back over to the county executive and happy to answer questions after the rest of his presentation.
Okay, so that's what we'll do right now. We'll take some questions regarding the economic mission as well as vaccines, vaccination, and the World Vaccine Congress. Members of the media, please raise your hands if you have questions regarding those topics. Okay, I see Jenny Abamu from WMAU has her hand up. Good afternoon, Jenny.
Hi, yes, WAMU. County Executive Elrich, I wanted to ask you, this is related to just the general kind of push to bring more businesses to Montgomery County. I noticed that there's a lot of different legislation on different types of permitting reform measures, whether, you have the council president's goal to reduce the time that permits are required for businesses to enter. And then you also have some housing permitting reform things that are going on in the state to offer more certainty for businesses and developers. I'm really curious, County Executive Elrich, what's your stance on kind of the permitting reforms that be taking place to kind of offer different things to businesses to drive incentives for them to come?
I think, it's sort of a mixed bag. When you talk to people around the region about permitting, we're pretty comparable to what other people have to go through. Probably the biggest difference in Montgomery County is parking planning is a bit of a problem. It's slower to process things and do things that other jurisdictions don't do. And Montgomery County is cursed with a dual approval system, which none of this legislation addresses. which is basically you have to get parallel approvals from the planning board and from the county government. And so in a lot of areas, this leads to delays in getting permits approved. I'm a big believer that, like most of the rest of the country, in fact, every place but here, these kind of things should be controlled through the executive branch, where zoning decisions make more sense in park and planning, but permitting should be more centralized within the executive branch, so the developers just have one door to go through. And hopefully over time, we will be making suggestions to move in that direction, because what we do is not efficient, and the developers know it, and almost everybody knows it. Park and planning is not happy with that, but it is what it is. I think the other stuff, anything you can do to try to narrow down times, as long as the effort to narrow down times matches the investment we make in staffing in the agencies that are supposed to do this. So if we're asking a department to turn something around, and you know that those departments are handling multiple applications, you want to make sure they can turn things around more rapidly. They need to have people available to do that. And you don't want the result to be that you take time away from dealing with other applications that aren't prioritized, so that their situation gets worse in the name of making prioritized developments go a little bit faster. I think all these things can be worked out. I think conceptually the legislation makes a lot of sense. We've done a lot of reforms in our permitting department already. We've got a dashboard. People can actually see how we're performing. So be very happy to see, how we implement this, and just make sure we don't sacrifice one group of people for another group of people.
Can I just ask one quick follow-up? When it comes to the Maryland Housing Certainty Bill, you put a comment on there about your concerns related to the permitting reform that they wanted to do, where they kind of wanted to, I guess, secure interest for developers, etc. I'm curious if you could comment on that a little bit.
I think, I haven't seen the latest iteration of this, but, our concern was locking up. You can do things too early and you can do things too late. I think the principle of not letting a jurisdiction change the rules after an approval is a good one. And I know this was not targeted on Montgomery County. It was targeted on other jurisdictions where a project might come in and people decide they don't like the project, and so they change the rules, so the rules of the game change. And that's not something that we should do. So I was more than happy to see changes to the legislation so jurisdictions can't do that. I can say that, Montgomery County has not gone around changing the rules on zoning in order to change what can be built. So that's a good thing. And I think a lot of our concerns got addressed in what did or didn't happen in Annapolis this time. But I think the effort to make sure that there's some certainty in the regulations makes a lot of sense. It costs money. I mean, if you take somebody all the way, which goes to my point about this dual approval system. If you had a clear one set of approvals from the county government, you know that the day you walk into the office, you know that the day you walk out. As soon as you set up dueling approvals that don't necessarily align with each other, you've set yourself up for more work than is needed. And this is a place, I think, this is up for the county to go in this direction unless the state decides to legislate that, which I don't think they're going to do.
So you didn't think it was taking too much power away from the counties?
I don't worry about limiting the time and ability to change the rules.
Okay.
I mean, that's something you probably shouldn't have the power to do. I think the zoning stuff is, where we had more qualms about changing the zoning. I mean, we've tried to, I'll talk a bit more about this, but we've produced like over 9,000 affordable housing units in the 7 years I've been here. We are committed to building affordable housing in this county. And it may or may not be true about other jurisdictions, but we're certainly deep into this. And this idea that simply building more housing produces affordable housing is just patently false. I mean, the best they can argue is it might lower the increases, but when you already have rents that are unaffordable, the difference between a 6% increase and a 4% increase is meaningless to a person who can't afford the rent in the first place. Same thing with lowering the price on a unit. If a house is, $1 million and you lower it to $950,000, it's again meaningless to the people who have the least ability to acquire housing. So these bills never focused on or had tools or mechanisms to generate affordable housing. And that was, my biggest concern. coupled with the fact that there are places where if you took advantage, for example, of some of the things the council's done, you'll actually lose affordable housing with no provision to replace it. That's where I have my disagreements.
Thank you, Johnny. Members of the media, any other questions about the economic mission and or vaccines, vaccination, World Vaccine Congress? No more questions on that? Okay, Mr. County Executive, you can move on to other topics.
All right. Thank you, Sean, for joining us today. So speaking of housing, I want to thank my housing team for this project. It's really an important one. The picture that we're showing on screen is a rendering of the new NoBe 2 project in North Bethesda, which had a groundbreaking last Friday with SCG Development. This development will bring 268 units of fully affordable housing to the Pike District, just a short walk from North Bethesda Metro. And that location matters. When we talk about transit-oriented development, we're talking about putting people close to jobs, transportation, and services so they can take advantage of the opportunities around them. And we all know that a lot of young people going into work cannot find any affordable housing in the county. If you try to go to Bethesda and you're new in the workforce, even if you're in a professional job, it can be very challenging for you to afford apartments that cost $2,500 or $3,000 a year for a studio or one bedroom, let alone something bigger than that. And so building this affordable housing in a place that we're hoping to be a job center, and we're really focusing, for example, on the development at the Metro in North Bethesda. Having these units is really important for the people we hope will be working there. That's why the location matters. What stands out here is the level of affordability. These homes are being built for residents earning between 30 and 70% of area median income. And that range reflects people who keep this county running, workers, families, and seniors who need housing that matches what they earn. And in fact, if you read literature about affordable housing, what you need to build, when you're building a mixed-use community, the literature says you actually need to build more affordable housing rather than less, because mixed use means lots of retail. Retail jobs pay very poor wages that are unable, most likely will not allow you to rent most places in Montgomery County. So if you're going to build development that requires a lot of low-paid workers, you also need to develop more affordable housing for those workers so they can actually afford to be here. This number is significant in our system to yield as many as 268 units. If you were lucky enough to get 15% of the units affordable, you need almost 1,800 market rate units to be built among multiple projects in order to get 268 units. What we've been able to do here in one project is very, very significant. The county made a significant investment to help make this happen, including $38 million loan from our Housing Initiative Fund, the largest permanent financing agreement we've done to date. And it includes a pilot to support the project's long-term viability. A pilot is a payment in lieu of taxes. The state also contributed critical financing, and SCG Development stayed committed to delivering affordable housing in a market where it would have been easier to build something else. This project is part of a broader transformation in North Bethesda, and that growth is important, but it only works if people can afford to live nearby. We've been focused on producing, preserving, and protecting affordable housing across the county. Since 2019, we've helped create or preserve more than 9,000 affordable homes here. And I've proposed $100 million in the FY27 budget in order to continue that work. NoBe 2 reflects what happens when we stay focused on the fundamentals, housing people can afford in places where they can succeed. And I appreciate the work of Dr. Bruton and his DHCA team and SCG for getting this project done. It expects to be open in the summer of 2028. Finally, I think right before I left for Taiwan and India, I transmitted my FY27 recommended budget to the council. The council will be holding public hearings on April 7th, 8th, and 9th. I strongly encourage residents to participate. This year's budget was challenging. Costs are rising. Revenues, thanks to the Trumpian impact on the local economy, are now predicted to decline from our previous projections. They are not projected to be less than we previously had, but they are projected to not be as much of an increase as we were hoping for. And, I remind people that over the past, I guess, 5 years now, we've run surpluses as high as 17% in the county. So we've been generating revenues beyond our projections. This is the first year in a while where the revenue projections were lowered by the state in light of what the changing economy due to the work the president is doing. Thousands of jobs have been lost, more are being threatened. Companies have shuttered, and all of that has an impact on county revenues. Trump promised to shift responsibility to programs to the states. He was very clear about that. He talked about the federal government is not going to do X, Y, and Z anymore. These are things the states are going to have to do. He did not send any money over with the shifting responsibility. In fact, money that we had previously from the federal government for doing the services at our level don't come with the shifting responsibility. The responsibility comes with the cost. And all of this was done to save federal dollars in order to create massive tax cuts for the wealthy. So the very wealthiest people in this county are getting amazing tax cuts at a time when the county is looking at reduction in tax revenues and serious impacts on our services. Now the state, and to an extent the county, have to replace the reduced funding, or we face the closure of important social programs, and that includes schools, where cuts might be necessary in order to bring the budget to a balance without any new taxes. You can see this impact even more with the state. Their situation with Trump is even more dire than ours because they get more federal money than the county gets. And we've been targeted. It's pretty well known that Maryland and Montgomery County have been targeted for some of the most severe cuts of the Trump administration. At the same time, we've seen an increasing demand for services across the board. In this budget, we focused on protecting the fundamentals, starting with our schools. The budget fully funds the Board of Education request, provides $3.8 billion for Montgomery County Public Schools, an increase of nearly $190 million over last year, with the county's contribution increasing by $179 million. That's more than half of our tax-supported budget. It includes full funding for the negotiated agreements, as well as support for special education, continued investments in student mental health, and funding for 28 security officers in elementary schools. I'll point out that the security officers has been something that's been supported by the county. It's just been a matter of being able to afford phasing them in. And some of the support for special education does come on top of what we did last year, but it's important to understand the situation the school system finds itself in. Montgomery County has become a landing place for people who want to get their kids special education services from the private sector. And unfortunately, they've been able to count on the school system not being able to process service requests for kids as quickly as they're supposed to, which has led to automatic requirements that parents be allowed to get their services from outside the county at an enormous expense to the county. The teachers not only have to participate in the IEPs, which are the evaluations done with parents, teachers, and school psychologists and staff, but the teachers had to write the reports. And in the course of a teacher's day, trying to write the reports on top of everything else they're supposed to do has made it very difficult for people to do this work in a timely manner. And so what the school system is going to be providing is support for getting these reports done. They believe in the long run it will save money. If the reports are done on time, the school system will not be forced to put as many kids into private placements, which will save the school system substantial amounts of money. These are not cheap. So we agreed with the assessment the school system had made and what the benefit of this would be. I want to show you this chart below, which gives you an idea of what's happened to Montgomery County funding of public schools, because a lot of people say to me, well, what happened to public schools? And you can see between 2002 and 2010, we had a pretty steady increase in school funding, both the amount of money the county put into it, but also the amount of money the state put into it. The gray line includes state and county money, and the blue lines represent county dollars that are contributed to the budget. And when we hit the recession in FY10, the county took a hiatus from that spending and actually started making cuts. And so what you can see is when you adjust the 2010 number for inflation, we fell below inflation and we stayed below inflation until this year. This is the first year where our total per pupil spending adjusted for inflation is roughly equal to what it was in 2010. And that's partly due to the state, because you can see by the blue line, our share is still not as large as it was in 2010. But when you combine it with the increases in state money, we are in fact back at 2010 levels. This is an important thing because all those years in between, when we're looking at this declining amount of funding that was going to the schools compared to where we were in 2010, it was a period of the schools becoming more diverse, having higher levels of poverty, having more kids struggle with disabilities, and basically being more difficult to teach in while having less resources to do the teaching. It had a negative impact on the quality of education in the county. There is no way, and it's absolutely unrealistic for people to say, well, the schools declined and, no matter how much we give them, look at what they've done. You've got to understand what goes into teaching and what's involved, particularly when you're dealing with the effects of poverty. We didn't have this issue if you go back 50 years when the county was pretty homogenous and pretty middle class and working class and did not have much poverty. When that changed, it changes the nature of teaching. And I've been in the classroom, so I know what this means. It's a real thing. And so putting in additional resources to help deal with the issues that are raised by poverty is something the school system recognized for a long time, and for years the county recognized as well. So I'm glad to see that if this budget passes, we'll be back at least to where we were in 2010. And I think we put ourselves on a sounder footing. The reduction in school funding from 2010, like I said, came with a lot of challenges to the schools. So hopefully we're in a better place. Superintendent Dr. Thomas Taylor said in his budget that this budget, quote, significantly increases operational funding for our school system and recognizes the essential needs of our students and staff, and that these investments are, quote, vital to ensuring every student has the tools to succeed. The Montgomery County Education Association also weighed in. Their president, David Stein, said this budget reflects, quote, real leadership and a deep commitment to students, educators, and strong public schools, and called on council to fully fund it. We've also continued to invest in early childhood education, including funding to help families access affordable childcare. Since 2019, we've invested more than $71 million in early care, created over 1,200 childcare seats, and supported hundreds of educators entering the field. Budget choices reflect real decisions you have to make. The council will be making these decisions about how we allocate limited resources, and those decisions are stronger when they're informed by the people who live and work here. I look forward to watching the public hearings next week, and I'm going to pause now and turn all this over to Dr. Stoddard to answer any questions on the HHS team with other updates, and then I'll take your questions.
You can start, Dr. Bridges, if you like.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Stoddard. No additional updates this week. Mr. County Executive always promoting the great services that we provide. We understand that there may be mental health challenges in the community, so I remind the public and our viewers this afternoon of our 240-777-4000. It will continue to be a message as we navigate the challenges that are nationally and internationally out there that may cause some stressors and anxious times for individuals in the community. So thank you. I'll stop there and turn it over to you, Dr. Stoddard.
I just want to talk briefly about a couple of, I think early successes with the Joint Operations Center model that we're trying to develop in Montgomery County with our police, fire, emergency management, and others supporting it. They moved into a shared space about a month ago, and it turns out they were doing some work in the space technology-wise when we had a couple of incidents earlier this week on Tuesday, the 31st. One of those was a double shooting that occurred inside of a townhouse in Clarksburg. And it turned out that, because fire rescue and police were in the center together, they were actually able to, in real time, access the body worn camera video of the first responding officer, and fire rescue was able to quickly identify that there were 2 victims and where they had been shot, and were able to assist with some direction on the tourniquet placement with the officer. And they were actually able to shave about 4 minutes off of the traditional response time by being in the operations center together, because they were actually able to identify that the scene was secure much more quickly than they would have if it had been relayed through the emergency communication center. And so it was an early success story from this effort that we're sort of, slowly undertaking. It's going to take us some time to fully develop this model out. It's not going to be, fully staffed 24/7 at this point, but obviously it shows the power of, the increasing technology that the county executive has worked with the council to continue to invest in public safety. And it shows that, that the use of that technology can have real improved outcomes for both victims and our first responders collectively. And so just wanted to highlight that as a sort of an exemplar of some of the efforts that we're undertaking in Montgomery County to try and make our emergency responses more efficient.
Thank you, Dr. Stoddard and Dr. Bridgers. Members of the media, any additional questions this afternoon? I see Tom Fitzgerald, Fox 5 DC. Good afternoon, Tom. Your hand's up.
Hi there. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. I just had a question about a piece of legislation that's being heard today in Annapolis. It's legislation which would allow for cameras at crosswalks in Montgomery County, in Anne Arundel County, and Prince George's County. And I was wondering, County Executive, if you had thoughts on this. Obviously, Montgomery County has been at the forefront of this kind of technology for drivers. This would be aimed at drivers who are violating crosswalks. But do you have any thoughts on this? And have you gotten any pushback from residents about the cameras in the county?
So I haven't been briefed over this. Over the last 2 weeks while I've been gone, this has not been put on my table. So I would kind of reserve judgment, but we do know when we talk about pedestrian fatalities that sometimes these folks are in crosswalks and people just are not stopping. So it would be interesting to see what this experiment shows. I can only imagine that there would be a flood of tickets pretty quickly because you see it all the time. And where you draw the line about when a vehicle can be in the crosswalk relative to where that person is probably going to make a lot of difference in terms of how how people react to it. So I will have to read the bill. Now that you've piqued my interest, I will do that.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Marianne Chassad, Montgomery Community Media. Good afternoon, Marianne.
Good afternoon, thanks. I actually had a question for Mr. O'Donnell, if that's okay. It was about something that you were talking about last week. I think I see him there.
He's still here. Sean?
Okay, I see him. Yeah, thanks. I think last week you were talking about the sediment testing that the county's working on with the state and DC Water around the Potomac sewage spill. But do you have any updates on that or any details? Like what exactly is it that's being worked on? And also what's the county's role in that?
So thank you. Actually, we have conversations ongoing with our partners, DC Water, Maryland Department of Environment, Montgomery County Department of Environmental Protection, as well as our counterparts in Virginia. And so I don't have the details yet. I can say that Maryland Department of Environment does have the regulatory authority to oversee and monitor the work being done to remediate the area and determine safety levels. And of course, we're participating at the Montgomery County level to represent the needs of our population, make sure that we're conveying health information to the population, safety information. So I don't have dates at the moment, but they are talking about what locations they'd like to do it at and how to share that information. The sediment testing is a little different than the water testing in that The water testing has an EPA defined safety level that is a little bit better known with the population. It's advertised where there's beach areas, and there's different levels for the seafood and shellfish testing as well. So with the sediment testing, the partners are looking at what some baseline information would need, and then if they find things, I'm sure they'll find things in the sediment. I don't necessarily mean pathogens, but they'll find things in the sediment because there's things in the sediment. But the question will be what actually constitutes a risk. And so when we've got that information, we'll bring that back to the public and share it with our community. But yes, I can confirm MD is very interested in making sure this happens, so that we can address any concerns that are out there. We want to make sure before we lift the final piece of our advisory that we have information that will tell us how safe that is.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bethesda Today, I see you on camera. Go ahead. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I have a question for the county executive. I did ask about this at last week's media briefing, and I got some information from your HHS team, but I wanted to also ask you about it. Last week, while you were overseas, the Maryland Attorney General's office's Independent Investigations Division released body camera footage of a incident that occurred where after an individual was released from Montgomery County Police custody, that he later died. I was just wondering, Mr. County Executive, have you seen that video, and if you had any reactions to it, if you have?
So they are arranging for me to see the video. So you can ask me this question probably in a couple of days, definitely next week. I would just say, I haven't seen it. Some of the comments might be concerning, so I'm very interested in what's in there. And we're already looking at issues involving the response to it. So everybody is engaged and understands this is something that has to be taken seriously.
Okay. Thank you. I will follow up.
Okay.
Thank you.
You know where to find me.
Somebody else had a comment? No? Okay. Members of the media, any additional questions this afternoon for the county executive and county officials? No more questions? Well, thank you for joining us. Stay safe. Have a great afternoon, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Just that house from the 40s, and then to bring in